Okay, so here we all are together. I think that there are people still not here, but I think I will actually start, right? As I said before to the people who came early, I've never done this before. It's a really a new thing for me, and I'm kind of so excited that so many people are interested um, in my book and in play and teaching young children and all of that. So I'm not exactly sure how I'll go through this, but I thought I'd give you a little bit of background as to how the book came about. Um, I was just before we started, actually, I was looking through my files at trying to find, like, I remembered like something happening years ago that then I found it. I really found it, that in 2003, I heard from a woman named Philippa, who was the editor at Stenhouse Publishers. And Philippa was encouraged by Kathy Collins, who wrote the foreword for my book, to get in touch with me about a book having to do with play. And she said that I should write up a proposal and possible chapters, etc. I was friendly with someone named Cheryl Tyler, and we had often talked together about the idea of writing a book together. So we worked on something together that was not just about play, but really about kindergarten. And we wrote up this proposal, and then we sent it in. She liked it, but she had some suggestions for some changes. And then we started to get to work on this. And then Cheryl got a job as an elementary school principal in Manhattan, in the Bronx, actually, New York. And that kind of stopped our writing. Okay. And when I was thinking about it, I think, that it actually was a good thing, because I realized that Cheryl and two co-authored another book about play, a very good book, but we don't have exactly the same ideas. And so it was kind of a good thing that that didn't happen, but then I just kind of gave up on the idea. And then I guess it was about 2000, maybe 2014 or so, Zoe White, who had been a kindergarten teacher at the school where I taught after I left, actually, became an editor at Heinemann. And Zoe tried to encourage me to write a book. And she said, I'll help you, I'll walk you through it, etc. Don't worry. I said, I can't, I've never written, I just can't do it. She said, yes, you can do it, you can do it. And she really kind of pushed me to work on the book. And about midway or a third of the way through the book, through the writing of the book, Zoe discovered that she was pregnant with triplets. No, with twins, I'm sorry, with twins. And she took a leave. And so Katie Wood-Ray became my editor. Now, I've been reading Katie Wood-Ray's books, and I'm just, like in awe of her. And I was really nervous. I said, oh my God, she's not going to like, but she was so fantastic. I learned so much from her editing. And she was very supportive of what I wanted to say, basically. And so in 2016, the book came out. And then in 2018, it was translated into Mandarin in Beijing. And I just found out, actually, on my blog, that 21% of my blog readers are in China, which is kind of interesting. It never occurred to me. So anyway, so that's how the book came about, right? And I thought about how I wanted to do the book. I knew that I didn't want it to be just like a how-to book. I wanted it to be more than just a how-to book, but I also know that that's important, that there are teachers who haven't done this and they want to know, how do you do it, But I also thought that it was important to have some background into why we do this. And that's why the beginning chapter, where the beginning chapters came about. So I thought I'll just kind of, I was looking through the book again, which I haven't looked at in a little bit. And I was thinking about some particular parts of the book, and I'll tell you what I'm thinking of. And you should be asking questions, all right? Because I think that will drive me also, it will drive what I'm going to say. So I was looking at page 2 of the book. I don't know if you all have your book there. And reading about reading what I wrote about Ken Robinson. All right, Sir Ken Robinson. And he said, creativity is putting your imagination to work, and it's produced the most extraordinary results in human culture. And I was thinking about creativity because I hear that a lot when I go into work with teachers, like, you know, I want to have a very creative classroom. I want to be creative, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that I have come to understand is that it's really not important, in my estimation, it's not important for a teacher to be creative, all right? It's, you know, you don't have to be a creative person to be a teacher, to be a good teacher. But what you have to do is to set up an environment in your classroom that facilitates children being able to explore their creativity. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that your classroom has to be a place where children can explore, can take risks, can make mistakes, can make jokes, can be silly, can be all sorts of things, you know, and in that act will become creative. All right, but you don't have to be creative. In fact, you don't want to put creative bulletin boards up with your personal creativity. You want your classroom to be about your children, not about your personal creativity. Anyway, that's my feeling about that. And the other thing I want to say right off the bat is that I wish I could rewrite the book. All right. And the reason why I wish I could rewrite the book is because there is an expression that I use often in the book. And I really think that expression came from someone from Heinemann who was pushing it on me, because I can't imagine why I ever put it here, but it's very strong in the book. I use the expression guided play. All right. Now, guided play originally, it meant that guided play takes place in a purposeful environment that's been carefully planned to stimulate and support children's curiosity and creativity. My understanding of it was just what I said to you before, that the guided part of it is that I'm setting up an environment that allows children to be creative, to be inquisitive, to explore, right? But I'm not ever telling them what to do when they go to play. But there's a whole movement now, the guided play movement, and it's a big, strong movement where you set up a play environment and then you give children a sort of task, like you're going to be playing, I don't know, you're going to be playing fairy tale or whatever, you know. And that's the guided play. That's like the big thing now. And I don't want you to think that I mean that. All right. I absolutely don't mean that. I've told this story before. Some of you who do know me have heard this, but I'll tell it again. I saw a little video clip on Edutopia of Teacher Tom. I don't know if you all know who Teacher Tom is, but he has a very lovely blog. And he has a nursery school, I think in Portland or Seattle, I'm not sure, somewhere on the West Coast. And where? You know, maybe you should all mute at this point. All right, everybody should mute at this point. So Teacher Tom sat down next to a little boy who was playing with Play-Doh. And the little boy is pulling the Play-Doh and pounding the Play-Doh and all that. And Teacher Tom said, I mean, like almost to the air, I wonder what play is. What is play? No reaction. No reaction from this little boy. He just is playing, playing, playing. Eventually, Tom had to leave. He stood up to go to some other area in the room, and the little boy stopped playing with the Play-Doh, looked up at him and said, "Play is what I do when nobody tells me what to do." And I think that that should be written in big letters somewhere. You know, I think that here's this 4-year-old who he had the whole thing right there. It's what I do when nobody tells me what to do, you know. So scratch guided play. Okay. Trudy, anything that I should be responding to?
No, nothing yet.
Okay. So I in this chapter, I wrote about, first of all, the different types of play that children take part in, right? And the reasons why they are so important. And I cited the NAEYC notes on this. And I don't think I have to read that over to you, but because you've all read it, but I think that I think it's really important to be able to articulate all of these, to be able to articulate what it means that when it promotes social competence, or what it means when it provides opportunities for children to express and control their emotions. You know, so if somebody asked you about that, you could say this, and it's important to be able to say that and to understand that. And it's, we were kind of talking about this before we actually started, when actually Carrie came on early, about the incredible pressures on kindergarten teachers. I don't know how many of you are kindergarten out of the group, but it's really sad, because like if you ask an administrator of a public school, of a big public school that starts at pre-K and goes up to 6th grade or 5th grade, what is pre-K all about? Very easy. They could tell you all about pre-K. What is 1st grade all about? Very easy. Excuse me, if somebody is not muted, please mute yourself. What is 1st grade all about? They could tell you what 1st grade is all about. What is kindergarten all about? Not so clear, not so clear anymore. They can't tell you. Is it about children exploring through play? Is it about children learning how to read level D books? Is it about children being able to count to 100? It's not. It's very unclear now. I mean, it's clear to me, quite truthfully. It's clear to me, and I'm sure it's probably clear to you what it should be about. But the reality is, it's not clear to the general public or to many administrators. So that's why I think this beginning part of the book is really important. What I would love to have is a study group with administrators just reading the first 2 chapters of the book, not going through the whole thing, just the first 2 chapters. Let's see. I have places here where I put a star, and I don't see where I put a star. I'm going to read where I put the star, so then you'll come back to me. Is it possible for a teacher of young children to support social and emotional learning and healthy child development alongside academic learning, especially in the face of so many outside pressures? I said it is possible, and that a play-based curriculum best supports children across a wide spectrum of development. Right? It means that I think you can plan really carefully what kind of, what you're putting out in your classroom. I think children want to playfully write, to playfully read. You can put all kinds of materials out in your centers. And I think that a little while into not today, but I want to talk to you about the reflection journals that children have been using in some places with for choice time. But I think that I think you really have to understand what play is about, and that's the really important thing. Um, we have to be able to understand what play is about. And we have to be able to articulate what it's about. So in the book, I write about autistic play, right? And the decisions that children have to make when they're just painting a picture, all right? What should I put here? What color should I use? What kind of paint should I use? Um, and it doesn't have to happen just in the art center, you know. I mean, there's art. I'm like, I've seen children in a science center with all sorts of shells and kind of arranging the shells and in some beautiful order. And it was artistic. It was beautiful what they were doing. Um, sensory play, all right? That's a sticky point for me, okay? So now the new thing that I see since I've been teaching, I left the classroom truthfully and amazingly in 2000, in the year 2000. So I had a sand table, I had a water table. Now what I see is there are sensory tables, all right? And it's really funny because when I go into a classroom and I see sensory table center, whatever, and I go over to a child who's playing there and I say, oh, I see this is a sensory table. What is sensory? I have not had one child who was able to tell me what that meant. Um, everything is sensory, you know, when a child is playing with shells, when a child is holding sand, when a child is using clay, when a child is building with unit blocks, they're all sensory, you know. So I don't understand why teachers can't just name it what it is, all right? Just name it what it is. If there's sand in the table, it's a sand table. If there's water in the table, it's a water table. If it's ice cubes in the table, it's an ice cube table. You know, so I can't quite understand that, the reasoning behind it. And if somebody in the group really wants to defend that and say some more about it, I would love to hear that. So you should raise your hand if you want to say something, because it's a mystery to me. It's a bit of a mystery to me. And perhaps it's something to think about, you know, like, do we need to have a sensory table? Then the other thing is here, fine motor play. Okay, so I was in a classroom last week and it said that at a table, it said fine motor center. What does that mean? All right. Yes, if a child is stringing beads, they're using fine motor skill. If they're pinching clay and trying to make something with their clay, they're using fine motor skill. If they're in the art center and they're cutting a shape out of paper with scissors, they're using fine motor. So I don't know if I would ever have a fine motor center. I would understand that in all these different centers that I have, children are using their fine motor skills, and I'd be observing them to see how they're using it. How well are they using these skills? And what do I need maybe to teach into, to help with, to make easier, you know? I mean, if you see a child with a scissor like this, struggling, there's no reason why you can't say, try it this way, see what happens. Put your thumb on top and see what happens. You know, it's just giving a little suggestion, it's, you know, and see what happens, you know.
Yeah, a couple of questions, Renee.
There are questions. Good. Tell me.
Maria J. You want her to turn on her mic, or I can?
Yeah, Maria, do you want to turn your mic on?
Yeah. So we have been trying messy art, not as part of our choice time centers, but I was wondering, what do you think about messy art being part of an art center, for example? Or
Can you define messy art? What is messy art?
Okay, I think that's very new. We have been reading about this concept we don't really know deeply about this, but we have been trying. For example, just letting them paint and do whatever they want with the paint. And we had some kids who painted their hands or their feet, or they started painting maybe objects they had around to make stamps. And it's like very free kind of art for kids. So I was wondering, what do you think about that as being part of an art center, not having like a guide, like let's paint, I don't know, a sun, just let them explore the materials, not guide them through.
Well, I could say that I've never told children what to do at the Arts Center. I've always put out the materials that were there. I don't know if I've ever encouraged them to paint their feet and their hands, but I haven't, quite truthfully. Although I must say, I had one day when I taught pre-K. It was a combined pre-kindergarten, kindergarten, and there was a little boy. It was his first day. He was a foster child. All right, he had a really difficult home that he came from, and this was his first day in my classroom. And I showed him the easel and the paint and all that, and said, "Would you like to paint?" And he said yes. And I should have stayed with him, but I didn't. And I came back, and he was green. I mean, his entire body was green. Well, what did he know? This was fun, but I think that depends on your comfort level. All right, perhaps if this is your comfort level, perhaps you might have two art centers, and one is just messy art center, and the other is just the art center. In none of those centers, I would say what to do. But maybe the materials that were available in the other art center might be different than the materials that are available in the messy art center. I mean, that really goes with your comfort level, all right? How old are the children that you're working with?
3 to 4.
3,
Very young.
2 years old?
3 years old.
3 years old, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So as I was saying, I think that you have, it's your classroom, and you have to really feel comfortable with what's happening in your classroom. And if you are comfortable with that, then I would never say don't have a center like that. But I would make it a separate center. I don't know what anybody else feels about that. Any thoughts on that? Because this is something that's new to me. Raise your hand if you think you have something that you might add to that.
I have my hand up. I don't know if you can see it. Hi, Renee.
I don't know who's
Lauren.
Lauren.
Oh, Lauren. Okay. What do you think, Lauren?
Yeah. I actually taught art for 10 years and have been in early childhood for about 20. So I think, especially with young children, the exploration is the art. They're not product oriented. It is about the process. But then with that, if you're taking careful observations of what the children are doing, notice the places where what they're exploring. Are they exploring the color mixing of it? Are they exploring making prints? And they're trying to that's what you can then say, oh, I noticed this. What tools can I offer you to support this play? Or I noticed that you're trying to represent something and you're feeling frustrated from drips. I'm going to teach you how to wipe the paint on the edge of the jar. That's when you can also offer skills when it's appropriate. But especially with 3 and 4, the making is the play. It isn't about what they are trying to make, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's good. That's very good. And Lauren mentioned the word observation, and that's really crucial. Is really being a good observer and really observing. What are children doing? What are they trying to do? What are they frustrated with doing? Observation is really a key. Trudy, anything else?
Yeah, we have 2 more questions. Patricia was first, and then Carrie will be next with great questions here.
Okay, Patricia, I can't answer everything. I'll try my best. And I like the way Lauren jumped in, because if you know something that I don't know, you should definitely jump in. Okay, Patricia? You should unmute yourself when you
okay. I'm okay. my question was, but I just listening to the conversation, I think it's been answered. But it was, do you think that certain play is appropriate for specific ages? I teach second grade, and I just the thought of having a sand table sounds great. I guess I would just have to figure out what it is that I'm trying to achieve through it. And I don't know that if that ties with what you were talking about earlier about the guided play. So that's my question. Do you have any feeling about specific ages for specific play?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that there are certain areas that children are more interested in, you know. I mean, I think your children might not be interested in the sand table, you know, by the time they're in second grade. I mean, I had my sand table in kindergarten. I'm trying to think about whether we had it in first grade. I think we did have it in first grade, because what I remembered was that I had hermit crabs in my classroom, and the children asked who were at the sand table if they could bring the hermit crabs to the sand table. And it became a whole new kind of exploration, because then they took the what do you call it, Cuisinart rods, and they were building like different kinds of climbing things for the hermit crabs and the sand table, etc. And that lasted for a while, but at a certain point, interestingly, we emptied the sand table, and we were doing a waterway study, right? And we visited, I think, every waterway in New York City. You know, the year before we did a bridge study, and we visited all the bridges in New York City. And as part of the study, the assistant principal, who had been a science teacher, came and visited us and showed the children how they could use a shoebox to build different landforms, because we talked about how different landforms, waterways were formed because of the landforms. And so they did that in the shoebox. And I mean, the children always have the best ideas. And they said, why don't we use the sand table and make big landforms? And it became a huge project that they did. It took a long time. You know, we had plasticine, and they were doing research as different kinds of landforms, and they were building the landforms in the table. And then at a certain point, we had rain. You know, we made it rain and rain and rain until different waterways were formed in the, I don't know if I have it in my book. I can't remember if I put it in the book, but it's on my blog for sure. So yes and no. Okay. I think it depends on knowing your kids. I think that personally, by second grade, you're not going to have painting your feet and your hands at that point. But you know, I think that children might surprise you with what they're going to be doing at the Art Center. I just want to emphasize that you don't tell them what to do at the Art Center. You know, like, you know, it's such a wonderful surprise to see what they do. It's such an absolutely wonderful surprise to see how they use the materials and what they're doing. And then you share it, and then, you know, you see how it inspires somebody else to do something else, you know. I don't know if that answered you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Anything else, Trudy?
Well, we have two more questions. Carrie, about fine motor play, and then Lauren.
Okay, Carrie?
Hi, my question is in fine motor play, would you correct a child if they were using the tool incorrectly, or would you just let them continue on using the tool incorrectly?
All right, so first of all, I guess I don't use that expression, fine motor play. You know what I mean? They're using fine motor skills when they're playing, you know, but I wouldn't call it fine motor play. But you know, the thing is that I'll backtrack a bit. There was once somebody who came to my school to talk about spelling with us, with the whole staff. All right, and she said something that I thought was really was very smart. All right. She said that if a child is spelling the word what, W-A-T, you leave it. They're trying to figure it out. If they spelling it W-H-T, you leave it. all right? If they're spelling it W-E-T, you leave it. But if they are over and over again spelling it W-E-T, then you step in and you help them to learn how to spell the word what, because you don't want them to practice a skill incorrectly. You want them to explore to try to figure it out. And that's what I would say. If a child is using a scissor and is incredibly frustrated because they can't figure out how to hold it right, I would say let them try to figure it out the best they can. But then at a certain point, if you see them doing it over and over again, go over and say, let me show you an easy way to cut the paper. You just have to switch it.
Right. So what if they're using the scissors incorrectly and they're fine with using the scissors incorrectly and they're cutting everything and they're not getting frustrated? Just leave it.
That's what I did.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I did, and that's my personal part. I mean, I know there are
That's
people
what I was
who,
thinking as well.
that's what, the whole thing about the obsession with handwriting when young children and having, like, if you don't correct their handwriting and the way they're holding the pencil right away, then you're going to destroy them for life. I don't believe that. I think that my daughter, when she was between the ages of 4 and 6.5, we lived in Italy, in Rome, and she went to Italian schools. And when she was in first grade, they taught them to write perfectly, like script. They learned script before they learned printing. And when I look at her books from when she was in first grade, I couldn't believe that she could write so beautifully. She has the worst handwriting. Her handwriting is almost as bad as mine. So what good did it do her? She wrote perfectly. So I'm not obsessed with that. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Lauren.
Oh, I think, my curiosity is, the reason why I became a teacher is because I started working in a school where I saw that children's play and ideas were held in high esteem. And that's what the kind of school I wanted to be a part of. And I never thought I would be a teacher until I saw that. And now I'm in my 22nd year of teaching, and the kindergarten classroom I'm teaching is very different than the kindergarten classroom that I was taught to teach in 20 years ago. And it is a struggle, I think, to try to find the balance between the curricular demands, which are increasingly developmentally inappropriate,
Right.
with making sure that children's real learning, I think, through play and choice time are also met, and trying to find that balance where children are actively engaged in all parts of their day and not making choice time like 15 minutes at the end of the day, like making sure that it's the meat. And so I struggle with that too. I struggle trying to figure out how to, make everything happen in a day. Not that it all has to happen in a day, but how to make everything happen in a day.
No, I understand what you're saying. I had to, I felt the same thing. And I think there was even less pressure when I was teaching, but there still was pressure. And I had an advantage in my school because I had been teaching there a long time. And so I think maybe I got away with things that other teachers didn't. So for example, I completely refused to level my books in kindergarten. I said, I'm not going to do it. I just won't do it. I absolutely won't do it. So this is the last time these children are going to be able to not be in some kind of leveled group, and I won't do it. And I got away with it, right? And I think I got away with it also because I was looping, and because I think the principal had confidence that they would learn to read, and they did learn to read, but I think it's scheduling. I mean, maybe one of our sessions we should really talk about scheduling, because scheduling is a real challenge. But I always, when I go into schools, I really try to convince principals that, first of all, if you allow, now it's kindergarten we're talking about, kindergarten children to have choice time at the beginning of the day, all right, for a full hour at the beginning of the day, then it is going to make the entire day run so much more smoothly, and it's really difficult sometimes to convince them of that. But I think, let's give it a try. And I think when principals see how it makes a difference, that's usually very helpful. But in one school where I was working, I'm still working there a little bit, I'm almost finished. So the principal of the school, at one point he came up to me and he said, "Renee, I'm kind of concerned that the children aren't getting enough literacy." So I said, "Let's walk through one of the classrooms during choice time." And we went through the classroom. It was a room where a group of children decided to make a jewelry selling center because someone had donated a lot of beads to them. And they made up order sheets and they went to all the teachers in the school to take orders for jewelry. And they were doing all the writing on that. Kids were building in the block area and they were labeling things in the block. I mean, there was literacy, and I don't have to explain it to you. There was significant literacy taking place all around the school, but he was not satisfied with that. And I got really nervous. I thought he's going to cut back. He's going to cut back on this. I had convinced teachers that it was important to have choice time in the morning. And he's going to, when I first went there, it was like literally maybe a half hour at the end of the day, truthfully. So anyway, I had to think quickly. And I asked him what he would think about children writing in reflection journals, right, at the end of the day, at the end of choice time. And he thought, that sounds interesting. Any kind of writing, that's interesting. So he actually got journals for all, composition books that were like, the top part is blank for pictures and the bottom part for writing. And we introduced it to the children and we said, these are your books. And we talked about what it means to reflect on something. And we said, these are your books to write in. Nobody is going to be looking at them unless you want somebody to look at them. Every day after choice time, you can have 10 minutes to write about what you did at choice time, or who you played with, or what you played with, or what you want to do tomorrow. It has to be about choice time. This is your book about choice time. You can walk around the room. If you want to put words down, you can walk around the room to find words. You can ask friends about words. You can go back to where you were playing to remember what you were doing. But it's your book. Well, they love it. They love writing in these journals. And on the days when they can't write in the journals, like if there's a fire drill or if there's an assembly program, they're so upset. And what I've been hearing from the teachers is that children who actually really don't like doing writer's workshop, who it's a real struggle to do writer's workshop, love writing in their journals, And she does, give them the opportunity sometimes to share what they wrote with the class so they can, and the children can ask questions and they can talk about it. So, sometimes you kind of have to think about this helped in this situation. This really helped. The principal kind of stepped back more because he saw that they were writing every day. They were writing in these journals. At the beginning, they were just drawing pictures, but it really, the writing that they're doing after, now is really, well, I don't know now, this point of the year, because I don't think they're introduced until October. But like last year, the writing was just wonderful, So I think it's a matter of thinking about that, but it is a terrible struggle and it's unfortunate. But I think at some point, I don't know, at some point we have to hold our ground, but give reasons. That's why I wrote this chapter, because you have to be able to really cite studies that were done. You have to cite, if you're a kindergarten teacher, crisis in the kindergarten. You know, and show what the children are doing, show what they're doing. I really feel like children will, I think there's no trust. That's the problem. There's very little trust. You know, when I was teaching, I told you that my school had a lot of connection with Teachers College, and I was on their early childhood think tank, reading think tank there. And we met with different people. And one of the people who we met with for a full week was someone named Elizabeth Selsby. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Elizabeth Selsby, but you might be familiar with the Teachers College Emergent Storybook Reading. Are any of you familiar with that? That comes from Elizabeth Selsby. So, but what Elizabeth Selsby said was that if you do this with children, if you get a really good storybook with a plot and with good pictures and predictability, and you read these books to them 3 times during the week, 3 times, and then put the books in their hands and let them read it the way how they will read it, and then have a new book the next week and keep adding on books. There's a way that you can assess how the children are doing. At a certain point, it'll be like, say, corduroy, bear, on staircase, on escalator, lost button, and then maybe it'll be the bear lost his button, you know, etc. At a certain point, you could turn your back. After doing weeks of this, you could turn your back and listen to a child reading a storybook that you've read a few times, and it sounds like they're reading the words. It sounds like they're reading the entire text, right? But then that same child, a few weeks later, will come to you with a book, the same kind of book, one of those emergent storybooks, and say, I can't read it. I can't read the words. And that's when you teach the child. That's when you go into the guided reading with that child. That child is telling you that he's ready for guided reading. So this wonderful program was taken by Teachers College and changed to a 1 month or 2 month reading thing. 1 month, I think, emergent storybook reading, completely not understanding what the whole process was all about and why you're doing that. You know, so I think the big thing is that we have to really support giving more trust to children and to teachers. You know, I don't think I really answered your question, and I'm really sorry, because it's something I'm struggling with, how to deal with. But
Great conversation, Renee.
excuse me.
It was great conversation.
Okay.
We have one more question that's there in the chat right now. And this one is from Bethany.
Hello. So I am, it's important to note that we're in Canada, or at least in Newfoundland. We're only just starting our 3rd week of school here, and they weren't even full weeks before this. So, you know, our kids are on like 8th or 9th day of school. But just thinking about the first few weeks of kindergarten in your classroom and with like play-based curriculum in mind, what were the routines or like the parts of like choice time that you focused on or taught in those first few weeks to set your classroom up for like a successful choice time, or like almost teaching them how to play successfully, if that makes sense?
I think children know how to play, quite truthfully. They have to teach us more about it. But I actually ran my choice time the same way I ran a workshop, a reading workshop or a writing workshop. So I would have a very short, like all together on the rug talking about something. It could be about the center, what's in one of the centers. It could be about a strategy for something. It could be about working with a partner, depending upon what the children need at the moment, what I would think that they need. But I would never just let them go off. I would do that. I would start with that. Then when they go to their centers, that's, you know, then I walk around and I take notes and I listen in, and, you know, that tells me what I need to do the next day or what I need to talk about it afterwards. And then we end always with a share meeting. All right. And the share meeting often will circle back to whatever it was that I was talking about in my focus discussion at the beginning. So it kind of made a circle around. Now, with my kindergarten children, I started choice time. I had a shorter amount of time for choice time. It was not a full hour at the beginning. It was short because what I wanted was for them to want more, right? Not for them to get tired of it, but for them to want more. And so I kept, as I was observing them, I kept adding on 5 minutes here, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes here, and so I would leave that time, like say I had an hour blotted out. We didn't use that whole, we might be singing songs or telling a story or something like that. But the actual choice time was a little bit shorter. And then every day, based on my observations, it got longer and longer until I was able to make it like the full hour that I wanted it to be. And that full hour included, it wasn't the full hour of play. It was, it would be great if I could do that, but I wasn't able to do that. It was, my short 5-minute focus meeting and then a 5-minute share meeting at the end. And also clean up, clean up. Right? Is that answering at all?
Yeah, and I'm thinking like, thinking of like behavior, and obviously the beginning of the year, they're 5 years old, and in at least again the students that we have, not a lot of them went to like a formal like pre-kindergarten. There would have just been like either home daycare or whatever, and then kindergarten. So some of them even working with or playing with peers at their own age every day is a new concept. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking like in the beginning when you're setting up your choice time, and maybe it is a shorter period of time, how do you then deal with like their maybe rough playing or like dramatic play turns into chasing all around the classroom? Do you draw together for like a meeting again for 5 minutes? Or like, what are your strategies for dealing with that kind of like distracted, I guess, not really focused on the task ahead of them play behavior?
Okay, task, not a good word.
Yeah, I know. I'm just trying.
But I know what you mean. I do know what you mean.
Yeah.
But I mean, if at all possible, I would just pull those few children aside and talk with them and not make it into a whole big class issue. I don't think it always has to be a whole big class issue. But if it seems like it has to be a class issue, then that tomorrow you're going to have a talk about that, and at your share meeting, you're going to have to talk about it. But the big thing is why don't we do this? Rather than, rule down, we can't do this. There's a reason why you can't run around the classroom. There's a reason, but, I'm noticing that you really need time to run. You need that. And we need to try to figure out how we could have more outdoor time because you need to run around, children need to run, play, but there's a different kind of play that we do in the classroom. And I didn't, I didn't let the children, I didn't have that kind of a situation where there would be accidents all the time, and that's why I built up the time for choice time so that they were getting more time to become engaged, to be able to become engaged in what they were doing. The more engaged they are in an activity, the less that kind of thing happens. And also the physical setup of your classroom really gives messages also. I mean, if your classroom is set up with great big open spaces, it's all open, then of course they're going to want to run around in those big open spaces, and so like my classroom was set up like the different tables in the room and all that were kind of integrated into centers, so it was more like a laboratory almost, for different centers, so that's what happened. Yeah. Any thoughts on that? How are you guys handling that? Well, I hope that was an okay response. Right?
That was good. Thanks.
Yeah. So any more? Is that it, Trudy?
Yeah, no more questions at the moment.
So anyway, this is all different kinds of play that goes on. And the whole section on multiple intelligences is very interesting because the school that I went to last week is actually founded on the idea of multiple intelligences, which was quite interesting. It's really a framework for thinking about the way children engage and play. And so it's a really good thing to become very familiar with. Doesn't mean that, you know, this is a child who only does things that are logical, that involve logical mathematical intelligence, but that's a strength of that child. And so you need to have opportunities for that child to be successful using that strength, right, within your classroom. I'm trying to see what else. And giving children opportunities in different centers. It's not like there's a logical mathematical center. First grade classroom that I did some work in. They were, the children were doing, the class was doing a whole class study of our healthy body. Something, I forgot the name, the exact, something about our healthy body. And this group of 4 children decided that they were going to build a skeleton in the block center. And they were like, it was just a mess. They just were, they wanted to do it. They couldn't figure it out. They were getting into arguments. it was a mess there. So that day I had a meeting with the first grade teachers, and the first grade teacher told me about what was going on there. So I just made a suggestion. I said, what about if you got a great big piece of mural paper and asked them if they'd like to put the mural paper down in the block center and maybe draw a skeleton and then use that as a structure, as a basis for trying to use the blocks to build a skeleton. See if they felt good about that. And they did, you know, they did that. And so I went into the room during choice time when they were there. And what do I notice? But I noticed that they had a ruler and they were measuring their arm. Nobody told them to do this. They were measuring their arm, and then they were looking at the blocks and trying to find the block that would be the same as their arm and put that out there. And it was really fascinating to see how they were doing so much math in this block center. And one child did something that really was very so exciting when I saw it. I have it on video, actually. It's on YouTube. It's called Measuring in the Block Center, in the block area. They measured the arm. It was the block that they found to be the arm was 11 inches. And so they're putting it down. And he said to the boy who was putting it down, he said, wait, I want to see something. And he took the block and he stood it up this way. And he said to the other boy, measure it now measure it. And the boy measured it and said 11. He said, it's still 11. What a discovery. I mean, Piaget would have been very excited, right? I just got chills when I saw that. And I was so glad I was able to capture it on video. So it wasn't a math center, but there was math happening there. There are children who love to like write things, all right? They do like to do that and to interview people and all that. And one of the choices that we had was to be a choice time reporter. And children could be choice time reporters, and they had clipboards, and sometimes they would come up with a question that they wanted to explore during choice time, and they would go around to the different centers, like how are people working together, or what, you know, like what's happening with the materials, or what are people making, whatever. It started out very simple. What are they doing at choice time? And then they would put it, they had blotted out to the different centers. I had written out paper, and then they would record it, and then they'd report to the class. And so for some children, they like doing something like this, you know. Anyway, any new questions before I chatter on?
Yeah, we have one question from Janet. Would you like to say your question?
Janet?
Or I can read it.
Yes, yes, thank you so much. I always had that issue between, you know, if I'm sorry, I always had that little issue between how long to keep them at a center. Sometimes they get so engaged in the center and they start building things and and it becomes, like you said, a project that it takes a couple days to complete. And, like when they're younger, I guess you can assign them to different centers, or they can choose what center to belong to, and then they will start and finish a project or, an activity. But I know as they get older, even now, like when I give them Legos, like they want to keep their little building things and they want to elaborate on it and they want to put it together. And so,
Isn't
yeah.
that exciting? Isn't that what we want? Isn't that
No,
exciting?
it is. Yeah, they do take it at a different level. And a while ago, I I learned that if you just walk around and throw a question up in the air, all of the sudden it changes the play that they're doing, and they start thinking about other things. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just what we want. We want them to become more and more engaged in what they're doing. And time is an issue. Time is a big issue. And I think that children should know that they will have enough time to finish whatever it is that they're involved in. So like if they're working with Legos and they're doing something that they're very involved with and they want to add things to it, etc., then you as the teacher, like maybe it's your responsibility to be sure that they have a board that they're building on so that you could put it up on top of something so that they can come back to it the next day. Or that
that is exactly what happens.
Right.
So as an anecdote, today I told this group, you have to take the Legos down because what if somebody wants to build something with Legos tomorrow? They won't have enough blocks to start. And so this afternoon I found it hidden in the room. So they just stashed it away, so they didn't have to take it down. And yeah, I won't touch it, but yeah, that's always a
but I think the thing is to tell them if they're still working on it, that they can work on it the next day, that you'll put it someplace safe. If they're not working on it anymore, then you could document it, all right? Because you don't.
Yeah, maybe we could take a picture with their iPads and then keep it, and then
right.
Yeah, you're right.
And then they take it apart so that somebody else can work on it.
I like that idea.
But I think I don't want to keep this more than an hour because I think all of you have been teaching all day, and I know that you know how tiring that is. But are there any on the last page of this chapter? It's on page 20. I showed from one of the years that I taught a schedule that I had, right? And I told the parent that the schedule wasn't made in stone. I have down certain times, but it doesn't mean that that's going to happen at that time because we may go longer or shorter or whatever. And they understand that after a while. But I would send this home every month, like at the very beginning of the month, so that parents had an idea of what was taking place in the classroom. And on it, I would also put the names of the books that I'm reading, particularly chapter books, because I like to read chapter books with them, the projects we were working on, etc., so that they could talk to the children about what was happening. And some people send at home like a weekly newsletter, right? And I would say if you send home a weekly newsletter, put choice time at the top, all right? Because if you take choice time and you write about reading first and writing and what we're doing in math, and then you put choice time at the bottom, then that shows families where your priorities are. If you put it at the top, then they understand that this is important work that the children are doing. This play is very important, right? So anyway, if you have more questions, then I certainly would answer them. And I think for next week, the next chapter is the chapter "The Classroom Speaks," and I was trying to think of what might be interesting for you to think about. And what I was thinking is, what are the roadblocks to the voice you want your classroom to have? What roadblocks are in the way in terms of the voice that you want your classroom to have? And we've started talking about that already, but I think it's an important issue. Anything else before we go?
There was one more question there from Carrie quickly. Do
Oh, sure.
children move from center to center in choice time?
I mean, that's a big question. So, well, I think 4-year-olds, without a doubt, should, should go with it, center to center. I have a feeling in my class, by the time they came to kindergarten, I wanted them to commit to a center for a day, right? Not everyone I speak to agrees with that, but that's the way I felt about it. I felt like it was at kindergarten, they could commit to a center for a day, and that's why I built up the time so they would have more engagement. That's why I felt like it was my responsibility to make the centers interesting enough and with a wider range of material that would engage them for the entire time, and then engage children at different levels for the entire time. Now, I worked in classrooms where the teachers didn't agree with me on this, and I tried to observe as much as I could what happened when the children didn't, where they could go from one center to another as they wanted to. And I truthfully found a lot of children just aimlessly wandering around the classroom and not getting engaged in any center. So that was my observation there. I once tried something. Vivian Gusson Paley wrote some book, You Can't Say You Can't Play. I don't know if any of you have read that. And in it, she said that if children wanted to leave a center and go to another center, they first had to ask permission of the children at their center if it was okay for them to leave, because they're leaving a group. If the children said it was okay for them to leave, they could leave, but if they wanted to go into another center, then they had to ask the children at the other center if it was okay for them to join the group, all right? So I thought, that's interesting. And I tried it with my class. It was just such a failure for me. I just wasn't able to manage it. She was able to manage it. I wasn't able to manage that. It got really out of hand. And then I went back to what I was doing before. But I don't know. I feel like I wanted the children to really become engaged in something in their play. And I think this is something that is personal. And I would not say that this is something that everybody has to do. You must do this. You must have the children stay in the center. And sometimes somebody would have a meltdown, and nothing is set in stone. They're having a meltdown, and you deal with it. And if they have to change centers, then that's okay, but I think the general idea in the class was, and generally in my class, I can only remember one instance when children didn't want somebody to come into their center, when that child was having a meltdown from another center. Only one time, and that became a big issue. I had a whole class parent meeting about it, quite truthfully, because I felt like this is something that was not good. This was not very empathetic. But generally, the children are really good about that. They understand the needs of their classmates. Anyway, I think that answers it.
Thank you very much for answering my question.
So I'll see you next week. If you could come on like about 10 minutes earlier, if that's possible, then we'll start on more smoothly altogether. I'm excited about doing this, and I'm trying, as I said, I'm figuring it out along the way. The more questions you have, the better. If you read the chapter ahead and have questions about the chapter, then that's really very helpful for me. So I hope you have a terrific rest of the week.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
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 Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming. in person still. So,
Fantastic.
oh, it was okay. Oh,
Fantastic. I thought it went excellent, and the conversation, so many people are interested.
okay. I was wondering if I was boring or.
No, I thought it was really good. Now I have 3 other